thank you for joining this series, which I run is the internal communication series. There are close to 31 thought leaders from around the world who has participated in this. So thank you for taking the time. This is really to help people understand what are some of the nuances of internal communication, how can people get better at it, what are some of the best practices. So that's really the context. So before we start, it'll be great if you could introduce yourself to our audience.
Thank you so much, Anisu, for having me on your very popular blog. I must say that I have been following you, and it is a privilege to be here with you. And I'm sure your blog has now in many ways become a repository of all things internal communications and more.
Thank you.
About me, I am Shakambhari, and I have about over 18 years of experience in corporate communications. I am lucky to have witnessed corporate communications from both an agency as well as from a corporate side. I started my career with a PR agency and worked with mainly technology clients.
Okay.
And I very early realized that I have more inclination towards technology PR. So that's the industry that I have been throughout. And then I joined corporate communications and worked in different technology companies.
Fantastic. Yeah, and I had noticed that you have also done, you also work in the CSR space. So I think that's a very important aspect for organizations, and it also has a employee engagement angle to it. So that's a great area, and good that you worked on both sides. So that gives you a good flavor of what companies need and what agencies need. So let me begin by asking you, what is your understanding of internal communication? What's the definition? What's your understanding of it?
So I feel internal communications is a very critical function for any organization, which works in multiple ways, but most importantly in two ways. One, as the voice of employees to the management, and second, as the voice of management to the employees.
Right.
So it works as both eyes, ears, and mouthpiece for the organization to the people, as well as people to the organization.
Fantastic.
And mainly by acting as internal communication acts as a conduit between the management and the people. Management tries to express their aspirations, visions, expectations from people through internal communications. And eventually, as people share their experiences through internal communications, being a facilitator, so it works both ways, and eventually it becomes very critical in creating the culture of the organization.
Fantastic. That's a great point. And how does it get practiced in your organization? You worked in a few places which are more technology-oriented companies. So how does it get practiced? What are some of the aspects of it?
So in most workplaces, and currently also, I would say that internal communications is the backbone of our organization. And why I say that is our role actually cuts across to various stakeholders across the organization and also at all levels.
Right.
And each stakeholder's requirements are very unique. And then how do we help them draft their narratives in a way that the landing of their message is in an effective way?
Got it.
So, and in terms of how do we help delivering employee experiences, we try to run campaigns which are based on the pulse of employees and try to address the data that we are getting from employees. So I can also say that interestingly enough, having worked in this role for so many years, no two days are the same. And I always say that there is never a dull moment in the life of a communications person.
Fantastic. Absolutely. I agree with you on that. And could you share one example or one campaign or one initiative that you're really proud of? And, what are some of the ways in which, what is the challenge, what is the opportunity, how did you go about it? And, what is the impact that it was made?
So I think thanks to the recency factor, I would just take an example of something we did very recently, like last year. So as you would agree that, as managers, developing a personal brand is very critical because it also kind of is crucial to enhancing your impact to the organization and how you are being seen by your team members and your stakeholders. So to help on this critical aspect, we worked on a program last year, mainly to enhance the brand you through effective communications. And why I think this is unique, because we took learnings from internal communications. And we saw how it can be practiced in your workplace. So typically, any sort of training is typically stereotyped as L&D function. But this was more like a challenge that was thrown at us. So we did a pilot with mid-level managers, and I must say that the program was a stupendous success. And one of the main factors, I would say, is because of the openness of our managers to unlearn, relearn, and discover aspects of personal branding.
Fantastic. So, I mean, it's a very interesting topic you talked about. So, personal branding, of course, a lot of companies may even fear that, oh, if they invest in personal branding, then the person may leave the organization. But that's really not true. Is that, I mean, what is your understanding of it?
So I think more and more organizations are also realizing that people are their core assets. So while if people don't take pride in being a part of their organization, and people will take pride when they realize that the organization has invested in them, and in all sense. So this was also an initiative which was very evident that the organization is invested in you and is trying to do every bit to help you evolve your personal brand.
Fantastic. And what, according to you, is the biggest challenge that an internal communicator faces today?
So interestingly enough, I feel sometimes it's a lack of communications with the communication team, which is the challenge. And I'll tell you why I say so, because I think most often what happens is people work on their projects and assignments and their messages. But towards the fag end of when it comes to delivery of their messages, fail to take ownership, and somehow they feel that communications team will be best positioned to tell their stories. I personally feel that as the owner of the piece, you should be able to tell the essence of your message. However, yes, internal communications will accentuate to help you tell your narratives better. So that is one. And secondly, I also think that we may create a number of platforms for employees to engage and be forthcoming on their views. But the best platforms cannot guarantee you engagement if people don't come forward in a very candid and open way. So it has to be both ways.
Fantastic, fantastic point. And what, according to you, is the biggest opportunity you see?
So I think, as we know that I think trust is eroding fast, and the demography of people who are now coming into the workforce, the pattern in which they consume content is very fast evolving. So I see that internal communications is actually going through a sea change, which in turn provides a lot of opportunity for us to experiment, to see how we craft narratives which are better consumed, which has better attention span, and which land in a way that we want.
Interesting. And what do you, what are the ways in which internal communicators can add more value to the business? Because sometimes there is the sense that, they seem to be very disconnected. So what is the way in which internal communicators can add more value?
So again, this is a very interesting question, because often there is a very blurring line between how internal communications is really adding value. And so I think that while companies are focused in doing what they do best, whether it is creating technologies or whatever it is, ultimately they are dependent on internal communications team to tell your stories. So you can create the best of technologies, but guess what? Even in internal communications to your own people, if you are not able to effectively tell your story,
Right.
then you will not be successful.
Hmm.
And I think also the people who have worked on creating this technology, they take a
Hmm.
lot of pride when they
Right.
see, that the things that they have worked on is seeing the
Hmm.
light of day, is
Hmm.
being talked about externally. So they
Hmm.
also take a lot of pride.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of bonding with the brand.
Got it.
So I think, and with people being important assets for organization, I think again that point cannot be debated about
Yeah.
how important it is. Yes.
Fantastic. And what do you think are some of the key skills, some two or three skills that are very crucial for internal communicators to have?
So I think storytelling, and I
Hmm.
cannot emphasize this more because
Hmm.
again, it's something that is like a journey. You
Hmm.
cannot get a master at it. It
Yeah.
needs a lot of practice. So storytelling in a way that we are able to craft experiences into very good narratives.
Hmm.
And I think as more and more we are moving towards digital, how agile we are, how we are
Right.
able to, tell our stories in a digital friendly way.
Right.
And that apart, I think the soft skills of empathy and
Hmm.
curiosity will always go a very long way.
Fantastic. Great. They're very, very interesting aspects. Some of these are very soft skills, and despite that, it's so important to the communicator's role. And there are so many of these young communicators or people who are very interested to join the workforce and become great with, join internal communication. So, what advice do you have for people like that who want to become internal communicators?
So I personally feel that internal communications is an evergreen role.
Hmm.
When we started our careers, internal communications was like never heard of or practiced in a very, very limited way.
Right.
But from then to now, we have really covered a long journey. We have come a
Hmm.
long way. And I
Hmm.
don't think there can be any better time than now to actually join internal communications.
Right, fantastic. And related to that, and as a woman leader, there are a lot of women also out there who want to make a mark in this field. What's the advice for young women professionals who want to be good at communications overall?
So Anisu, while I really think that any profession should be actually, gender agnostic,
Correct.
but that doesn't take away the point that, I personally also find women to be better communicators.
Right.
And probably that's the reason we see so many women taking on that role
Right.
because they are obviously, I think, the way they are able to assimilate the messages, convey the
Mm.
messages, and are better
Mm.
storytellers in the process. So yes, I think if you are a woman and if you are in this field, you are just happen to be at the right place at the right time.
Okay, great. And right now we are going through a crisis, the COVID-19 situation, and there are many other crises which may come up. So, what's your advice for internal communicators? How should they think differently, engage differently? Is there anything they must do?
So yeah, actually, crisis is a time when internal communications becomes most critical.
Hmm.
So a couple of days back, I was reading a report from Edelman,
Hmm.
and it said that it asked people in about 10 countries
Hmm.
about the most credible source of information when it came to COVID.
Got it.
And can you take a guess on what people said
Um,
about
uh, Most important thing for them during COVID, I think maybe
the source of
reassure
information? The source of
the
information.
source. Okay, so I think must be experts. Is that right?
No. So very
Oh,
surprisingly, they said 63% people said that they trust the information that comes from their organization.
oh, wow, that's a big number. Okay.
Yeah. And that too in 10 different countries. So that itself, Anisim, speaks volumes about, what internal communications means in these troubled times.
Hmm.
So whether it is about reassuring employee, and it has
Hmm.
been a phase, right? In
Yeah,
different
yeah.
phases you need to play different roles.
Correct.
So in the beginning about creating awareness,
Hmm.
sharing timely information, your communication has to be very lucid as well as consistent.
Hmm.
And And then later in the middle phase also evolved towards sharing guidelines, what are the best do's and don'ts, what to do when this situation happens, or even there were times when people were slipping into despondency, so creating positivity,
Got it.
ensuring that we give the message that we all are in this together, and it's perfectly okay to not be okay,
Yeah.
because it's a first time for
Yeah.
everyone.
Right.
And building resilience, and eventually building positivity in the organization.
Fantastic. Yeah. That's
And
good. Very good. Yeah. Good. I mean, good messages that you're sharing, because I know these insights are so valuable for internal communicators to know how they add value in this kind of a scenario.
yeah, so I think from our organization point of view, I feel very proud to share this, Anisu, that we were very, very proactive, even as early as January.
Okay.
Maybe because of our, our headquarters in South Korea, and
Right.
because they were already impacted. But
Okay.
we had started our pre-health screening and all that as early
Oh,
as January.
wow. Okay.
Yeah, so in terms of preparedness, I think
Mm.
we were still very way ahead of our times.
Fantastic. Fantastic. So, according to you, I mean, if you were to look back or think about one aspect of internal communication that you would like to change or do differently, what would that be?
So I think because I'm very passionate about internal communication, so I get swayed away. But I honestly feel that
Mm-hmm.
even in the current times, internal communication still remains underrated.
Mm.
And I would ideally like to see it moving from a tactical role to a
Right.
more strategic partner,
Fantastic.
where it's not just one, two, or the top leaders who understand your value, but
Mm.
it's across the organization, or at least the key stakeholders, which start valuing you much more.
Great point. I mean, I'm sure that will be appreciated by a lot of people. And the last question to you is, can you talk about one trend that you spot right now or in the recent past, which you feel is very important for communications or internal communication?
So I think, as the times are changing, a lot of the way in which we are consuming content itself is changing. The amount of time we give on our browser with,
Mm.
fast changing windows,
Mhm.
limited attention span. So
Right.
how do we really, how we create content
Mhm.
so that it is consumed by the evolving demography of people? I think that is a trend that is here to stay for some time.
Fantastic. These are fantastic insights. Thank you so much for taking the time to share these. Really, really appreciate it. So thank you again for taking the time to be on the show.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Anisu. Absolutely my pleasure. And like I said, that you, by connecting with so many people in our fraternity and meeting the people of our tribe, you really have been a trailblazer in terms of actually leading from the front and trying to bring all of us together through your blog. So
Thank
all
you
the
so much.
best. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Take care. One second.
Thank